بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب زدني علما
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على النبي الكريم. وبعد, to proceed, resuming and continuing with fiqh al-nawazil, the jurisprudence of contemporary issues, reading and browsing over the resolutions of fiqh councils of today, of contemporary jurists, what they have analyzed and what they have concluded with as rulings, inshallah. Especially living here in the West, a lot of these topics concern us, and really important that we understand the qararat, what these gigantic ulama and these jurists have concluded with regarding these topics, inshallah. And just as a side benefit, before we begin today's topic, regarding these majami' al-fiqhiyya, their rulings and them coming together, even though it's perhaps a number of scholars across the globe coming together, it does not meet the requirements of an ijma', a consensus. Lajnat al-da'ima, they were asked, هل القرارات المجمع الفقهي الإسلامي بمكة المكرمة بمثابة إجماع علماء المسلمين? Pay attention to that question. Are the resolutions of the Fiqh Council of Mecca al-Mukarrama, the Muslim World League, considered to be a consensus, an ijma' of those scholars of the Muslims today? So they respond by saying, Alhamdulillahi wahda, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulihi wa alihi wa sahbihi, wa ba'd la yu'tabaru ijma'an. He said, this is not considered to be an ijma'. وهكذا أمثالهم من المجامع وبالله توفيق. And he says the same ruling applies to the rest of the fiqh councils of today. Whatever they conclude with and come together, it is not deemed as a binding hujjah or a statement that you can say the scholars of today unanimously agree. So what they conclude with, we benefit from, but it doesn't hold the opinion or as an opinion of an ijma'. So that's one. And also with these fiqh councils, قد يدخل فيها الدخل, يعني somewhat of people that could enter as its members that may perhaps apparently the scholars may welcome these individuals, generally having good thoughts, and then afterwards they may realize such individuals are not really suitable as to be members of that council. And we'll give example, inshallah, as they say, بِالْمِثَالِ يَتَّضِحُ الْمَقَالِ. With the examples, the speech becomes clearer. The Muslim World League, which is given the title as المجمع الفقهي برابطة العالم الإسلامي بمكة المكرمة, who is at the lead of it is the Mufti Abdul ALHAQQ. There was a time period where Yusuf al-Qaradawi was from its members. So I believe in the year 2017, they announced officially, the Muslim World League announced the termination of the membership of Yusuf al-Qaradawi after being classified on the terrorism list announced by Saudi for Gulf countries. The brothers perhaps have read this tweet. Saudi, I believe UAE and Bahrain and Egypt. So Yusuf al-Qaradawi no longer is considered from its members, and anything prior was perhaps at a time where they didn't know much regarding him and probably assumed that he was a jurist amongst the jurists. So that is a side benefit, inshallah. And also today, if you really look at the Muslim World League, المجمع الفقهي الإسلامي برابطة العالم, they're not as they were before, when it was the time of Bin Baz and those great scholars were involved. Now it's getting a mixture of very leniency in terms of its movements and also its statements and its decisions, which is unfortunate. So moving on with today's topic, inshallah. Today's topic is the fourth discussion from the modern day nawazil, the contemporary issues that we're going to discuss. It is مسألة شراء سيارة عن طريق التمويل, purchasing a vehicle through financing option. So those who want to follow, they could follow by having the handout sheet from the Telegram, or they can follow by taking notes with us, inshallah. So with no further delay, we ask the brother to begin from the beginning. Tafadhal.
Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Allahumma ighfir lana wa li muallimina wa liman lahu haqqun alayna amma ba'd. What is car financing? Car financing option involves a lender extending credit equal to the vehicle's total cost to make the car purchase.
طيب. So the topic of tamwil, or auto financing of a sayyara, of a car, its general definition, if you look into the modern day dictionaries of today, they'll list as the following. It is a financing option that involves a lender extending credit equal to the vehicle's total cost to make the car purchase. So when we read this and we see that they refer to it as a loan, as someone giving a loan to meet the cost of a vehicle to complete the purchase. And this is the financing, which is tamwil, person providing mal, wealth, in completing a purchase. And there is some sort of profit therein on a markup. So let us understand this. Inshallah, we're going to try to our best to break it down. The various of different ways the financing works. Because people now, they say that there's a traditional way of car financing. There's a traditional way of car financing. And there's other ways that people now have introduced as incentives or to attract customers. So a traditional financing is, there's three parties involved: a customer, a car dealer, and a financing company. The customer and the car dealer negotiate to agree on a selling price for the vehicle. Due to the reason that the customer does not have the sufficient amount of funds, the finance company is involved as a third party, as the car dealership needs full payment for the vehicle. The finance company pays the dealership the agreed amount of the price of today. In exchange, he will collect monthly payments from the customer, which amounts to more than the cost of the vehicle or the amount they are giving to the car dealership today. The difference between the amount collected from the customer over time and the amount paid to the car dealer today is their profit. So this is also referred to as the cost of borrowing. If you look at, if anyone's seen an actual financing agreement, a contract, a lot of the times they don't really disclose that. But if you look at, alhamdulillah, I was able to come across through a brother who went through this transaction. He shared the contract with me, they call it the cost of borrowing. So this is what they refer to as the financing cost, and is most often based upon some type of interest rate. In this case, the customer is the registered owner and operator of the vehicle, and the only purpose of financing company is to provide the capital to facilitate this transaction. Since this type of transaction is clearly interest-based, and we know that a lot of the times the scholars say that this is clearly impermissible Islamically, and the rulings of the fatwa on the traditional type of financing. Then it came as zero financing as offered independently by some dealers, sometimes referred to as a higher price purchase. A higher price purchase. You go to the dealer, you get it to be presented with this incentive, with the vehicle being at a higher price. This is how it's commercialized. Some car dealerships, upon learning that the customer is Muslim and concerned in dealing with interests, will offer a zero type or a type of zero financing agreement. In this case, the car dealer will find out the cost of financing for a specific deal, and that this amount, so they agreed upon the purchase price of the car. They say that the price of the car is fixed and even report a zero interest on the financing agreement. However, if we really look at the key indicator from the traditional finance above, we can see that the total value of payments funded by the customer to the financing company is more than the original agreed upon price for the car. In essence, like you can see, the customer is still paying a higher amount, which will make up the profit for the financing company. So some people, they say that this is who. It's just, he's grabbing one ear and then he's grabbing the next ear. Either you say this or that. Some say that this is a hila ala riba, tahayul, a form of, but we're going to read the verdicts firstly, and then read the different scenarios and the fatwa. Then we're going to, inshallah, conclude on each different one based upon the verdicts. Fadlan.
How can you finance a car? There are two different modern ways to finance a car. Financing that is arranged through a dealer or direct loan or line of credit obtained by you from a financial institution for that specific transaction that is paid back to them in installments at a larger amount. In most cases, the car is used as security for the loan to protect lenders from you potentially defaulting on payments. If you do stop making payments, your lender has the right to repossess your car and sell it. A lender could be a bank, car dealership, credit union, online lender, or virtually any other lending institution. Part of the financing process involves calculating the loan's term, interest rate, and monthly payments. Once you complete your term and finish making a car loan payments, you will have 100% equity in your vehicle.
So this is how finance works. This is it in a nutshell. Yes, there is certain details that are going to be shared that further highlights certain scenarios of it, inshallah. Tafadhal.
What are the different rulings that the scholars have issued? Concerning its Islamic ruling, some contemporary jurists and modern-day fiqh councils have issued general verdicts regarding it. The Permanent Committee ALHAQQACADEMY Da'ima for Islamic Research and Issuing Fatwa in Saudi Arabia issued Fatwa number 20,838 in response to a question raised regarding financing a vehicle on a 5-year term with a fixed 7% APR. They said, لا يجوز التعامل بالمعاملة المذكورة لأن حقيقتها قرض بزيادة مشروطة عند الوفاء والصورة المذكورة مجرد حيلة وإلا فهي معاملة ربوية محرمة في الكتاب والسنة وإجماع الأمة. It is not permissible to deal with the aforementioned transaction, being it is actually a loan upon the condition of increase when paying it off. And the scenario mentioned is just a scheme. Otherwise, it's a usurious transaction that is forbidden in the book and the sunnah and the consensus of the ummah.
طيب. So what we have here is the Permanent Committee, Lajnatu Da'ima, which is a farra. it's a branch of Hayat Kibar al-Ulama, the senior scholars of Saudi Arabia, and issuing fatwa. There was a question that was raised about financing a vehicle on a 5-year term with a 7% APR. We generally know that's like usually the standard. Some of them have lower percentage, a little bit higher. That is usually it, especially when it was first introduced, it was of 7%. Who knows what APR means? What is it an abbreviation for? Huh? Who knows what APR means? We can understand these terminologies, inshallah. And it's going to lead us to another terminology. What is APR, brothers? Sorry? Annual percentage rate. So it is yearly a percentage that alongside the administrative fees and interest is going to be added alongside the payments that you owe. So you're going to perhaps, it's going to be within that year. So the benefits that they say about this APR, the quicker you make the payments, the lower you actually pay. The longer you make it as a duration, the longer you're going to pay, or the more that you're going to pay in the longer duration. So it is based on yearly. It's based upon yearly with that affair. So when you look, and we're going to speak about this topic of APR, and this, what is its opposite is called flat rate. For example, with flat rate, you're always paying a particular percentage on the original amount of money you borrowed. So the monthly interest rate doesn't change with flat rate. In other words, flat rate is called fixed rate. They call it fixed rate and variable. So this is a fixed rate. With APR, you're paying, for example, 4.5% of your remaining debt. So as you make more repayments, your APR goes down as you owe less money. See the difference, brothers? So a flat rate, it's an interest rate on the original amount of the money you borrowed. So whatever the finance amount that you were given, you're going to fix rate for that. You borrowed 20,000. They gave you maybe 2%. So you're going to take that 2% and add it to that 20,000, and that's going to be the whole amount you're going to pay throughout the term. Fixed. APR, it is based upon the remaining amount you owe. So depending on your payments, it fluctuates. So we want to understand, is interest haram only the fixed interest, or is variable interest haram alongside with it? Something to keep in mind that whether the interest rate is fixed or varies, it does not make the transaction permissible, since in both cases it still entails the meaning of access or excess to due to the debt and loan being outstanding. The same also applies to APR rates and flat rate. So this is something we put together before. Anything that is an increment or like an increase due to the outstanding debts, whether it is a variable, and it varies within the time period of the outstanding debt, or whether it's fixed, if it is due to the outstanding debts, then this is what they call riba, because it's wealth for wealth. And usually it's the particular forms of it is riba nasi'a. And it's wealth due to a delay. Well, due to a delay. And it's riba duyun, they call it. Riba, interest of debt. So we want to first understand that part, inshallah, because a lot of the people, they confuse it with something else that is fixed. You know, something else what we call a markup of a profit that a person does. He sells you something. He says, if you buy it up in front in cash, it's going to be 20,000. But if you pay installments, it's going to add up every month to being 25,000. This is different. This is different from something called fixed rates for debt. This is a purchase. He has a price for installments and he has a price for upfront. It's finalized at the time of contract which of the two prices you're going to enter. So a person he chooses to sell you this person at this price at a later date. But when we're speaking about the topic of borrowing money or someone as a lender or a third party, this is slightly different. This is slightly different, and this is where the confusion lies, because some people, they want to really address, is financing actually a loan? Is financing actually a loan? Or is it some sort of purchase and investment that is being done as like murabaha, as a profit? So this is going to lead us to it, inshallah. Tafadhal.
Number 2, Darul Iftah al-Misriya issued the following statement: financing is permissible in Islamic law because it is a form of murabaha transaction. Murabaha is a sale in which it is permissible to stipulate an increase in price in exchange for deferring payment. Even though deferment is not considered real currency, in murabaha there is an increase in price for deferment. The objective is to conclude the sale when there is an agreement between the two parties. There is no objection to the sale and people, buyers and sellers, are in need of it. This form of transaction is not considered riba usury according to the legal maxim. Name such kinds of contracts when the commodity comes between two separate transactions, there is no riba. You should not name such kinds of contracts as loans to avoid misconception and mixing it with the legal maxim that says each loan which brings benefit is deemed usury. End of quote.
So Dar al-Iftah al-Misriya, we mentioned prior that they have a few verdicts that they single out with from everyone else. And this is something that you have to keep in mind when reading their verdicts and their research. With financing, they said that the qurud, the loans that the banks give, are of three types. And they mention ما يتم صرفه مالا في مقابلة مال من غير نظر إلى توسط سلعة أو استثمار بل غاية المعاملة أن يأخذ العميل مالا ليرده بأزيد مما أخذه وهذا نوعه حرام. يعني so the first type is that they give you a loan or wealth, money, for other money that you give them back as more, without any looking at any product or commodity involved or any investment. The mere fact is just he gives you wealth so you can give him back more wealth. So he said this type is haram. And he says you're not allowed to take this type of loan from a bank except in the ضرورة, or they say أو الحاجة التي تنزل منزلتها, that is, or need that fills its place. The next one, they say that the loan is ما يكون البنك فيه وسيطا في شراء سلعة أو عقار ما. That the bank is like a middle person and helping you purchasing a commodity or land or something, where they purchase it with a price and then they sell it back to you in installments at a bigger price. So they said this type of sale of installments is permissible. The next one, so the number 2 is called HP. Some of them, they call it in the UK as HP. It's hired purchase. Like you hire the bank to purchase something for you, and then they sell it back to you in installments. They sell it to you in installments at a higher rate. And that one has conditions, the HP. Number 3, عقود التمويل الاستثمارية بين البنوك والهيئات العامة وبين الأفراد والمؤسسات، والتي يتقرر الصرف فيها بناء على دراسات الجدوى لمشاريع والاستثمارات المختلفة. So now he's speaking about financing, which is like an investment between the bank and the different organizations and individuals. So they said these are عقود جديدة. These are new types of contracts, which in reality, this type of financing is really newly introduced. And it was done for the public's interest, because at times the price of something could be extremely high and it's difficult. Like certain things of a house or a car, it's not affordable to purchase in cash anymore. It's very difficult for people. The general public. So they say this is تحقيق المصالح, to establish much good. So they say والذي عليه الفتوى أنه يجوز إحداث عقود جديدة. So in terms of introducing new contracts, it's permissible in fiqh, as long as there's no gharar or darar, they say. There's no ambiguity or harm. And they bring that Ibn Taymiyyah says this. So they said this calling this one a qard, a loan, is not correct, because you're going to confuse the people with كل قرض جر نفع فهو riba. Everything that is of a loan and it entails a benefit, then is riba. So he said if it's a personal loan, this is haram, right? But if it's done for tamweel, financing purposes, then he said it's not okay to call it a qard. So this is where they come from. They don't look at this as a loan. They look at it as a form of murabaha, of a surplus trade, and a business investment between the bank and the client and whoever is involved. We'll continue, shall we read more?
Number 3, the International Islamic Fiqh Academy. The Council of the Islamic Fiqh Academy in its 6th session held in Jeddah, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, from the 17th to 23rd Sha'ban in the year 1410 Hijri, corresponding to 14th to 20th of March 1990, having studied the papers presented to the Academy on the subject of sales on installments and having listened to the discussions that took place on the subject, the resolves: first, it is permissible to fix an increased price for a commodity sold on a deferred payment as compared to its cash price. It is also permissible to mention different prices for cash and deferred sales.
So that is somewhat with an ijma'. بيع التقسيط, and having a sale purchase of installments higher than its upfront price, that is حكي فيه إجماع. Some scholars have said there's somewhat of an ijma' regarding. Yes, some of the contemporary ulama opposed. Who? Gigantic ulama from them, Sheikh Albani or Sheikh Muqbil al-Wadi'i. So both of them, they're against بيع التقسيط, because they see it's بيعتين في بيعة. And the Prophet ﷺ prohibits 2 sales in one contract or one affair. That if you purchase it up front, there's a sale price. But if you purchase it over time, there's a particular price for it. So there's a prohibition from the Prophet ﷺ, نهى عن بيعتين في بيعة. He prohibited 2 types of sales in one, and this is how some of them explained it in. And others have explained it differently, the hadith. So, but in regards to the majority of scholars, they see it to be permissible. And they list proofs. They list proofs regarding that. And inshallah, after the brother is done reading, we'll read the verdict for that.
Even the deferred prices can vary according to the different periods specified for payment, and such variance can be expressly disclosed by the seller to the customer. But the sale cannot take place until the parties agree to contract a particular mode of payment and specify whether the payment is in cash or deferred. Therefore, if the sale takes place without specifying a single particular mode of payment, leaving it uncertain whether the buyer shall pay in cash or in installments, the sale is not valid according to Sharia.
So we say to them that maybe on that, the meaning of the hadith is having two types of prices. This is for where it's not finalized. When he goes into a contract, he doesn't know what he's going to pay. He's still up in the air. Is he going to pay up front like this, or is he going to pay like that? That is perhaps what is referring to. But as for his finalized, he knows what he's going into with a price. That is different from the one that is prohibited. Told?
Second, it is not permissible in installment sale to fix the spot price on cash basis, then to charge interest expressly tied with different periods as separate from the price of the commodity, no matter whether the parties have agreed on a particular rate of interest or have left it to the current market rate.
So some of them, they have this APR. So you're going to see that it's going to fluctuate. If you pay it off in this type of 5-year term, it's going to be this price. But if you pay it off in 7 years, the total amount of the price is going to be that. So this is what they're talking about. This is not allowed. Hold on.
Third, if the buyer/debtor delays the payment of installments after the specified date, it is not permissible to charge any amount in addition to his principal liability, whether it is made a precondition in the contract or it is claimed without a previous agreement, because it is riba, hence prohibited in the Sharia.
Yeah, so they asked Sheikh Saleh Al-Luhaydan, a questioner from France, I purchased a car without any interest. However, if I fail to pay the monthly payment in its fixed time, they add an additional fee to the original amount. So what is the ruling of this? He says, with no doubt you entered the contract upon the basis of paying riba. And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ cursed the one who writes riba, the one who consumes it, the one who pays it, and the one who witnesses it. And you made the contract upon the mutual agreement that you shall pay riba with no doubt about it. If you are capable of finding any way out of this problem, then it's upon you to do so. And being there, they aren't looking at it if it's halal or haram, they're going to demand from you the amount of money you owe them. So the Lajnat al-Daim also say, charging interest in case of default on payment of the due installments falls under riba, which is prohibited according to the Quran, Sunnah, and the consensus of the scholars. The question lies, nowadays many business contracts contains this condition of paying a late fee if there's a delay in the payment. In this case, one should try his best to avoid what he can of this, especially regarding sales. But in terms of loans, it's even more severe. And with purchases of sales, you're going to find that if you don't pay your phone bill, there's a late fee. If you don't pay your rent, there's probably a late fee. But in terms of loans, it's more severe, the affair. So some of the scholars, they mention that certain exceptions to this, especially even some of the jurists that have like fiqh councils in North America, they say there's no problem with late payments for other types of contracts which were originally not financial debts, there's no problem with late payments for other than types of contracts were originally not financial debts, such as construction contracts and the like. So if you can put a penalty charge for other than debts. If, for example, pizza doesn't deliver your pizza in 40 minutes, you can put a penalty and say the pizza's free. right? Or something of that sort. But in terms of the duyun, putting penalties on debts, this is where the riba starts. If a Muslim is forced to accept a condition of penalty for late payment in contracts such as rental agreements, electric company agreements, phone company agreements, and other take it or leave it type of agreements, it is permissible for him to agree to that as an exception, but he must make his payments on time in order to avoid any sin that he may result from dealing with interest. As the one who devours, or the one who consumes, interest is the one who pays interest equally. It's like the one who pays interest equally, and كلهم سواء. And some other scholars, they come out and say with late payments, it is a dhari'a ila riba. It's a means to riba. So they said, whatever is a means is permissible in the haja. When you have a dire need for it, it's permissible. So here they say it's permissible, but you should try to pay it before the deadline. Try to pay before the deadline, and your need will make it exceptional. And then the group of ulama under that council that we listed before, AAIOFI, that's the abbreviation, ALHAQQACADEMY, they call them. And it has some of the professors of Saudi Arabia, part of it. And also some from India and Pakistan, Taqi Usmani, jurists and different people. They say regarding default being charged, that it's permissible that the contract of murabaha consists of undertaking from the customer to pay an amount of money or percentage of the debt on the basis of undertaking to donate it in the event of delay on his part and paying in installments on their due date. So even like Saudi Sheikh by the name Sheikh Abdul Mutlaq, he permits some of these contracts that has a late fee, but they, as the institution, they take the late fee charges and they donate it. They don't take it themselves. So they do this to preserve their wealth. If they don't put any late fee, the people are going to take advantage. And when a group of scholars said whether they donate it or not, the affair is the same. Riba has occurred. But nonetheless, we know the affair regarding borrowing and loans for late fees is more severe. So this is something to pay attention to with it. But if it's something that a person finds it no other alternatives, they say one should try his best to avoid what he can of this. As for that which he's trialed with and does not find any substitute for, then perhaps the sin will be upon those who have trialed the people with it, and Allah knows best. And some late fees you cannot avoid. They're everywhere. And the sin is upon عَمَّتْ بِهِ الْبَلْوَى, it's upon the people that trialed with them. Follow?
Fourth, it is prohibited haram for a solvent debtor to delay the payment of the installments from their due dates. However, it is not permissible in Sharia to impose a compensation in case he delays the payment. Fifth, it is permissible for the seller to impose a condition in the sale agreement that if the debtor, the buyer, delays the payment of some installments, all the remaining installments shall be due at once before their agreed date. This condition may be a valid condition, provided that the buyer had agreed to it when entering into the sale agreement.
And this is what happened with some of these contracts. If you miss one payment, all of a sudden everything is due at that moment, and they probably even cancel your contract and confiscate your car, confiscate it. So this is something to pay attention to, inshallah. This is what they're mentioning, that's permissible if you agree on that. لا يحل مال امرئ إلا بطيبة من نفسه. The wealth of no one is permissible except with his consent. And he's given the consent. Hold on. والمسلمون عند شروطهم. Hold on.
Sixth, the seller has no right to secure the ownership of the sold commodity after the sale has taken place. However, it is permissible for him to impose a condition that the buyer shall mortgage the sold commodity with the seller to secure his right of receiving the deferred installments of the price.
طيب, so this topic of securing your vehicle as a collateral, just in case you default the payments, you don't come through. Is this allowed? The Lajna or the council are saying it's permissible. Yes, there is some khilaf between the scholars. Like if you go to the books Al-Mughni and different books in fiqh, they put certain conditions that he cannot do so. They said, firstly, the car is not yours. I mean, the car is now in the ownership of who? The person that you financed the car to. How could you take someone else's belongings and determine as collateral and security? This is where they're saying. But in reality, if the person agrees, there's no harm in that. يعني يجوز للبائع أن يشترط على المشتري رهن المبيع عنده لضمان حقه في استيفاء الأقساط المؤجلة. So if he doesn't come through with all the rest of the installments, they take the car and they can use it to make up for any loss they have for the rest of the installments. So whatever they agree on, al-Muslimun and the shurutim, this can be accepted. This can be accepted. So this is what you find if you don't come through. And the way they do this with financing, they make you pay for a particular registration with the government. I want to read to the brothers the exact procedure so that they can understand. How they make you submit. So they make you do something called PPSA registration in the case of default. The creditor could apply to the court for an order against the debtor, and so the PPSA allows the creditor, for example, the one who provides the finance, to perfect its security interest in the assets. So any defaulting on the loan agreement, they have the right. And this PPSA stands for Ontario Personal Property Security Act. It's a legislation that the government governs. The person can use personal property as security for the repayment of the debt. In simple terms, it just means a collateral to the government. So you're basically signing up, and you have to pay for that fee too. When you're doing financing, he tells you we have to register and you have to pay for that registration fee. And sometimes it's like $1,000, huh? Or it's sometimes, or I mean, there's another one. Sorry, the freight that's close to $1,000, but this one it can be I think from $100 or less. So you're paying for that. You're paying for that. تفضل.
Recommendations to carry out further study on some issues relating to the sale on installments so that it may be possible to find out an absolute ruling about them after preparing sufficient research material on them. Among these issues are the following: A. Discounting the bills of exchange through banks. B. Payment of debt before its due date against a rebate. That is the issue of da' wa da ajal. C. The effect of the death of one of the parties on the remaining installments. Verily Allah is all-knowing. End of quote.
So meaning there are further things that they need to research. Alhamdulillah, if you go back to the resolutions, it's found in English, they did address these topics. They move on, next one.
Number 4, Palestine Islamic Fiqh Council issued the following statement. The Islamic Council for Fatwa in the country issued a fatwa prohibiting the purchase of cars through the financing transaction on the grounds that they are usurious contracts, even if they are given the image of just being a purchase in installments. It is a sale contract between the person who wants to buy a car and the dealer of the company, so that the car is financed through the bank and that the bank lends the car to the person who wants the car without interest initially upon specific installments. Then the bank refers the interest amount that is to be added to the installments back to the dealer. Undoubtedly, this is a forbidden contract in which usury is clearly circumvented. And that is because the one who wants the car, even if he does not pay usury, is a reason for creating a usurious transaction that he knows about. It is not permissible for a Muslim to be the cause of establishing or concluding an unlawful contract. It has been affirmed in a hadith that the one who consumes usury, the one who pays it, the one who writes it, and the two witnesses are cursed. And he said they are all equal in sin. End of quote.
So we've read some of the Fiqh Council's speech regarding this. Yes, the other councils don't have much speech, but from what I found of their research, like every other Fiqh Council that exists, from what's apparent is that they deem this transaction to be impermissible. The only one that I've really seen that makes it permissible is Darul Iftah. Darul Iftah. Every other Fiqh Council. But there is one, I've seen a council that refer to themselves as Islamic Council of Europe, or Fiqh Council of Europe, where they said it is permissible for Toyota only, for Toyota. Why is it permissible for Toyota? Because they say Toyota, they're the ones providing the financing, and they own that financing service and the car. So it's like you're dealing directly with them as a dealership. You're purchasing a car from them, and they're selling it to you on deferred payments at a higher amount. So this brings a question: does Toyota, how do they consider, like if you go to their website, it's quite interesting. Like when you go to their website, for example, I went to different websites of different branches here in Toronto or in different places of the GTA. Toyota financing in Mississauga. The website, they say if you would like to finance or lease a Toyota vehicle or even require assistance in acquiring a no credit car loan, we can make that a possibility. Apply for credit online today and save time and hassle. And they mention a different part, and I'll show you another website of theirs. From the website where they're using these terminologies. Because when you go back to their websites, they refer to it as a loan. As a loan. So it brings us a question: is it just a wording they use, or is it an actual loan? Because when I followed it up, I seen that Toyota, they have their own bank. As of September 30th, 2022, Toyota Bank has over $5 billion in assets. And then they're initially called Toyota Financial Service Corporation. And they even mentioned the location of their bank. It offers to customers financial services that include auto sales financing, credit cards, retail sales, corporate bonds, investment trusts, and insurance. So this is a bank. So when you're saying I'm going through the dealer and the dealer is doing everything, it's not necessarily. They're third party, even though they all come under together. Toyota is financing it, their bank. And this is in the benefit now of dealerships, that they're trying to profit more by making themselves the financial institution and the lender. Instead of like other banks. So they do now in-house financing. In-house financing, they call it. But it still needs to be looked into further with Toyota. So this is what they're giving them the verdict. They said Toyota, they own their financing system. So whether they call it a loan or it's not actually, because you went there to purchase and they sold you something in installments at a higher price. Whether there's an interest rate or not, they said that is the markup of like a profit for the purchase. So this is where their perspective was. But even with that, when you look at these wordings, you have to first look at the contracts. They themselves, and when they specify in the contract the amount of borrowing. The amount of borrowing. So some people say, ليس العبرة بالألفاظ إنما العبرة بالمعاني. This is a qaida, yes. The consideration is not about the wordings. It's a loan, but is it actually a loan? They're saying. So this leaves it up in the air right now. Toyota, and most of the community here, like those who finance the car, they mostly go through Toyota. And most of the Muslims that you find that finance their cars, they go through Toyota. And Toyota, for Muslims, they say that they're making zero interest. So they say that they include the price of the car with the markup of the price and everything else as a flat rate. And you know you're going to the contract, going to pay one amount. It's not going to change over the passing of time. So this is what they say. And in terms of this contract, I'm going to get back to it, a specific ruling. But that was the council. That was the council. طيب, let us move on now to where the lajmat daima, where we said we're going to quote the lajmat daima, that is permissible if an item is sold on credit for more than its actual value and its deferred credit price is specified at the time of the sale with an increase, there's nothing wrong with this. Whether the price is paid in one installment or multiple fixed date installments. It was authentically reported in the two Sahih, authentic books of Bukhari and Muslim, on the authority of Aisha, that Barira made an agreement with her master to buy her freedom for 9 uqiyas, which is equivalent to 40 dirham of silver, paying every year 1 uqiyah. This was an installment sale. So this is where they get the proof that paying in long term could be more than was paid upfront. So when you go to a dealer, he typically makes you go through a number of processes. First, he makes you submit your credit application. And they do a credit check. And depending on your credit history and the price of the car, will all determine the interest rate. There's the interest rate. So these are factors to show even more that this is a loan. There's other factors to indicate. You can see, like with credits, if you have a good credit, you get a better loan, right? If you have bad credits, the interest rate is different. So you can see there's certain factors, because these people tell us it says a loan, but it's not actually a loan. Al-ibra bil-ma'ani. What we look at is the actuality of this transaction. The bank is not actually loaning, it's more as a sale, as they say. And one of the things they also say is the dealer, he goes to the financial institution or the financer and does a buy rate. It's called a buy rate. And the buy rate is like, for example, the bank or the financial institution, they give a quote of what you should give a rate to finance. So, for example, if the bank says 5%, they'll take that quote, and the dealer will add 2% maybe, and that's his profit. Sometimes he profits from different angles. So all of a sudden you hear your interest rate is 7%. Initially, the bank, the financer, said 5%. The dealer added 2%. So some people say, like, because they're using these wording buy rates, it shows you that the bank is more in purchase than actually loaning. Like there's a somewhat of an agreement, a pre-agreement already, that the bank has a partnership of involvement with a number of cars that they've as like co-owners, and they're financing and working together. So these are some of the things that they use to say it's more not a loan, but there are other factors that we're going to mention that shows that it's a loan. We'll move on, inshallah. طيب. With the Prophet ﷺ, in a hadith found in the Sunan, he said, لا يحل بيع وسلف. It's not permissible to have a loan and a business transaction at the same time. And they don't go hand in hand. Salaf or bay'. So if they're saying that this is a loan but actually a business transaction, it's not a real loan, we tell them this is doubtful. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited a loan with the incentive of a business transaction. Another thing too is this could be a hila ala riba, a scheme, as the legitimate daima, they spoke about this, because the hadith Abi Hurairah, لا ترتكبوا مرتكبة اليهود فتستحلوا ما حرم الله بأدنى الحيل. Do not commit the same things what the Jews did of certain schemes, and as a result, you're going to make halal what was haram. So this is what certain schemes like. There's something called tahayul ala riba. You're just changing certain wordings. You're going around. They're saying this is it. It's a loan. You went to the dealership and said, just get the word APR out of the way. I don't want to hear APR. Just put it within everything within the contract, and make it a flat rate, and I'll pay everything, and I know I'm going to the contract paying that. I tell them, but if this is still a loan, and you just made it from a variable interest rate to a fixed interest rate, it's still haram, whether it's variable or fixed, and that's if it's a loan. So it doesn't matter if you tell them to include within the contract everything. One of the reasons why variable interest is more harmful, because it has ambiguity to it. You don't know what you're going to pay. It's from the angle of gharar. Or else the angle of riba lies in both flat rates and variable rate. You know, the variable rate is like if you pay it within 3 years, you're paying all this amount. But if you pay it on 5 years, you're going to pay more. So that's the variable one, right? So the variable is worse, yes. Another thing too that makes it a bit slightly different, they add administrative fees with the interest when calculating. You know, when you're calculating your interest rate and what you're going to be paying as the APR. How's the APR determined? They take the interest rate and they add administrative fees, then they do the calculation. They even have now a financing calculator they find online. So you can see that this is very strange in terms of a regular business transaction. Like, why is administrative fees still included throughout the terms? But why is it calculated with it? طيب, yes, a person can just say that these are fees that a person takes of certain things, but it's very scary because Sheikh Mubil and Sheikh Albani were on the opinion that a lot of these people, they charge interest under the title administration fees or this type of fees, membership fees. They just change the names, and that's what even some of the Islamic bankings they're resorting to now. Instead of calling it interest, they just call it administrative fees. So every new car buyer pays a destination charge, also called a freight fee or a freight delivery charge. Automaker sets these charges annually, and the cost covers delivery of a vehicle to a dealership destination, and these charges are usually not negotiable through some dealers. I looked at one brother's contract on financing. It was $1,000. The charge of destination, delivery and everything, $1,000. You're already paying so much, and then they put it in. Financing is expensive, brothers. And it's extremely expensive. طيب, another thing too, we hear of Sharia-compliant financing, halal financing. There's even a UK dealership, or they're even popular on Instagram and TikTok. They call themselves halal cars or halal deals for financing cars. And they tell you 100% halal. So their way is طريقة المرابحة للآمر بالشراء. It's called HP, hired purchase, where they go to the bank and get the bank or the financial institution to purchase that vehicle for you. Then they sell it back to you in installments at a higher price, as a markup of it. So we can see now their approach is different from a regular financing. That one is permissible. Some of the mashayikh, when they research this, they say it's permissible if, even though they have a certificate from certain councils that say they're certified. They say we have a certificate, and they printed it out. AAOIFI, that same council that certifies a lot of Islamic financing institutions of today. A lot of Muslim banks and Islamic housing corporations, halal car financing, they're usually certified by this company. So they say they're doing it murabaha. They approved them. They looked at their procedure and said it's halal. And they have some professors from Saudi Arabia who looks into their matters. But a benefit from Sheikh Sulaiman Ruhaili, he says that whatever they're doing with the bank, when the client approaches the bank, it cannot be a commitment where he cannot back out from. He just has to show his interest in a particular car. He makes some sort of wa'ad, but it has to be wa'adun ghayru mulzim. It can't be a promise that is binding, or else it's going to be like selling what you do not owe. So there cannot be any agreement between you and the bank of a final commitment until they purchase the car. And even within that transaction, if you want to back out, you should be able. So this is it. And like Menzil, the housing company, now they even started a car way of doing it too. I think they're going to do it like this now, as murabaha, amir shira. So you need to look. These are the questions you used to ask. If they have it binding where you can't get out, even though the transaction is not completed, of the sale purchase from the bank of the dealer, then this is where it's doubtful, brothers. This is where it's doubtful. طيب. And now even like Menzil has a waiting list for its car financing. طيب, another thing, we we need to look at is something called buy down. If there's a dealership, you want to make it zero interest, you ask something for a buy down. A buy down is where you say, I'm going to pay some money, even if it's extra. Make the price of the car more, just to remove that 4% and make it zero interest. So they give you this sometimes. And dealers usually want to get the car out, so they will accept this buy down. So some Muslims, they go to the dealership, and they said, I want to do a buy down. What's the buy down? In return, that you to make the zero interest, raise the price of the car. Or charge me more now as a down payment. That's a buy down. But when you look at, a lot of the times when they say zero interest, it's not really zero interest, brothers. I was looking at even a brother's agreement. They told him zero interest, but when they came to signing, it was 0.99 interest. How much is that, brothers? Huh? That came up to, when I looked at the actual car and the price of the finance, it came to like $2,000 more. That 99, who benefits? The bank or the dealer, whoever's lending that money as a finance. And also Toyota, they say zero interest, but they have 0.49. So you have to be careful. I really haven't seen yet 0.00. And even one brother told me, he was in a transaction where it said 0.0001. There was a 1% there. And also sometimes when they say zero interest, they mean for a particular term. So they'll say, for example, for 6 months is zero interest. For 12 months is zero interest. For the first 3 years is zero interest. If you don't complete this term, it becomes a higher interest. So a lot of the times when people say zero interest, it's not really there. Like people are just taken by the first words, but they don't really look into the terms in the contract. And they make you sign so quick. You say, brother, it says here 0.99. They said, don't worry, just pay it now, the 99, and you're good to go. I said, brother, I'm signing to something of riba, like this is doubtful. And there was someone who used to be in the Somali community who used to get a lot of people finance cars. Everybody's getting it under this guy, zero interest. So he would make the people sign a specific contract between him and them, zero interest. And then your real contract with the dealer was something else. He said, don't worry, this is the real one. But the real answer, the real one was with the dealer. That's why some people, he told a particular thing of amount that they're going to pay, they end up paying more. And I heard, I don't want to speak about people, but I heard he got arrested, subhanAllah. So Allahu Alam, if this is true or not, but there was other issues that was pertaining to these transactions. But people were getting financing cars, zero interest, right, left, center. We've seen everybody just subhanAllah getting cars. And some people had bad credit, and some people had good credit, and he was making things easy. But all of this was saying that it was halal for the people. And when in reality looked. And another thing that we need to look at, when they say zero interest, they're saying that the initial interest that was there, it became within the contract as profit on the asset of the car. It no longer, it transferred from interest to being profit on the asset of the car. Now it's within the price now, they said. The person is just making a profit on the car. So the question lies that if this was the case, why is there a financer involved? Why is there a financing company involved? Why does it say the cost of borrowing? Why this? Why this? Why all these signs that indicate that it's more like a loan and that the profit is on the loan instead of the actual asset of the car? Because if you really look at on the contracts, they give you a price of the vehicle that comes from the manufacturer. I think it's titled, the brothers correct me, MSRP. Huh? MSRP, like basically the price that it comes, that the dealer suggests that you sell it for. So this is the price of the asset. The profit is within there. This is suggested profit, everything. You guys are just adding all these other process, which is really based upon profit for extra money, money for money profit, or else the suggested profit is in that initial price. So this is another thing too. And I want to read you some other words, inshallah, and then we will conclude with something, inshallah. Initially, we know that prior, the dealerships, they're not actually the ones loaning the money. Before they used to work with several banks, and they simply arrange the financing for you. They're just like any service. They were the middleman. You can expect to pay some sort of commission. That's why there's some commission rate that they add within the finance. The dealers make their commission through what is known as a finance reserve. This is an extra percentage added to your interest rate, usually 1 to 3%. For example, a dealer may be able to get you a finance at 5% interest rate through one of the lending partners. This is called the buy rate, the rate at which the bank is willing to loan you the money. The dealer will keep this figure hidden from you, so he wouldn't tell you the breakdown, that his commission is added in your interest rate. What they will show you is the sale rate, the interest rate that includes their commission in this case, and it may be 7%. This is the 2% difference is where the dealer makes their money when they arrange the financing for you. That's the original way. But now we find that dealerships, so they said Ford, Toyota, I believe also Honda, they somewhat, you go through them, and some of them have parenting financing companies that for finance institutions, not of their own, that they own. But the two that they have their own is Ford and Toyota. They both have what's been attributed as their own bank or finance institution, that they provide everything. طيب, bear with us, brothers, we're almost done, inshallah. طيب, currently there are no car companies in Canada offering 0% financing. The lowest available is 0.99 from Chevrolet GMC. This is based upon the research of September 2023. That from 22 car brands in Canada, they made a research and found that the lowest of them is 0.99. I think that once before, I think 2021, Toyota, you used to do 0.49, 0.49 of the interest. And yes, there's certain exceptions where people may do a buy down, but even that is doubtful. Is it actually a complete 0.00? Because with financial institutions, the way the market operates is that there has to be some level of percentage of interest. And the banks, the government, everything is pushing for there to be at least some sort of percentage. So when there's no interest at all, it's like you're asking for too much now. And the market of the conventional market, it operates on a capitalism market, which is based upon the interest. For you to say completely strip the interest, it's usually non-existent. But we'll speak further, inshallah, when we conclude. So I want to give you guys some examples, because there's a contract I have here before me. When you sign a financing contract, you have to see what you're going to sign up for. And some of the brothers, they signed up and they regretted most of the time. And next class we'll speak about rent-to-own, the process of rent-to-own contracts of cars. طيب. Sheikh bin Baz, very much his fatwa, he says, إذا كان البنك يشتري السيارة من مالكها ثم يبيعها عليك بعدما يشتريها ويقبضها فإنه لا حرج في ذلك ولو كان بأكثر مما اشتراها به. He says, if the bank or the financial institution buys the car from its owner, then sells it to you after purchasing it and takes possession of it, then there's no harm in that. And they sell it to you even with more of what they purchased it for, there's no harm. But he says, أما إذا كان الذي يبيعها عليك مالكها الأول والبنك يقوم بدفع القيمة له ويقوم البنك بأخذ الربح مقابل ذلك فإنه لا يجوز. Oh, this sounds like financing with this. He says, as for the one that is selling it to you is the owner, the dealer. But the bank or the financial institution is just paying for the value of the car. Right? ويقوم البنك بأخذ الربح مقابل ذلك. And the bank gives a profit in return for that financing. He says, فإنه لا يجوز, that's not permissible. لأنه بيع الدراهم بدراهم وهو محرم. It is selling wealth for wealth, which is haram. It's riba, he says. And he said it's come from Lajmat al-Daima, that type of permit is not allowed. And he attached it, the verdict of Lajmat al-Daima then. So what's the summary, brothers, about financing cars? Okay, so the summary is the traditional financing. What's the traditional financing, brothers? Traditional financing agreement is there is three parties involved: customer, a car dealer, and a financing company. The customer and the car dealer negotiate to agree on a selling price for the vehicle. And when the customer doesn't have enough money, the financing company is involved and gives that money, and then there's an interest rate or benefit or profit, whatever you call it, to give back for that financing, that borrowing, they say, the cost of borrowing, they call it. That is haram, brothers. That is haram. And without most of the majami al-fiqhiyah, shouldn't differ. The next one is when it's referred to as 0%. 0%. You're getting a car for 0%. This has scenarios. If it's actually 0%, and they say it's 0, and then you really look into the contract when you're signing, it's 0.0.0, there's nothing else added. And also throughout the whole term, not just they tell you for the first 12 months is 0%. One brother came up to me and says, can I buy a car for 0% interest, but just for the first 12 months? So I'm going to pay it before, I'm going to pay it off before the first 12 months. I said, no, here it's not allowed. Because you're taking a loan with an initial agreement that's within the time frame of the terms and the prices, it can fluctuate. So it's not actually 0%. So that one is impermissible. So where do we get the 0%? The first scenario is 0%, and it's 0.00, but according just for the first term, for example. After the second term or third term, until the 5-year term, you see it fluctuate. They add, it keeps going up. One brother got in the mail, he said, "Wow, where did this come from?" He said, "This came, they give you a payout slip. He says, "SubhanAllah, that it went up more." So that is not permissible. The second scenario of 0% interest is they say to you 0%, but in the reality it's 0.49%, like Toyota and Honda says 0.99%. That is not permissible, because it's not 0%, please. It's just, I don't know what they did, but they called it 0%. When it came to really the terms and agreements, you see that there's some percentage there. So that's not permissible. The next scenario of 0%, everybody with us, inshallah? We're going with the conclusion now. Allah ya'in. After research, it is 0% for the full term, all throughout the term. And it's maybe through the bank, for example, 0% interest. Here, the problem is what the scholar said. Here is still, to the majority of the opinion of scholars, that this is still considered a loan. So him charging you extra in installments, that by the end of the installments you actually paid more than the loan. He says, "SubhanAllah, why is the money not adding up?" Of course, this is what they profit. They're trying to profit from this angle. So if this is, as we said, what is more closer, that this is being a loan, because the initial MSRP, the manufacturer has suggested the retail price and determined what is the real profit already. There's no more need for these additional amounts. These are just for what they're doing, profit for your loan. So here it would be not permissible to take any extra. And they said there's some Islamic banks, I don't know how they exist, but they said there's some example banks that provide 0% interest loan. They really do a friendly loan. Qardan hasana. If you're trying to get married, mashallah, they give you a loan. And you pay back exactly. It's like a grant, but you have to pay it back. So some institutions, and Islamic institutions, I don't know how they conduct it. So some scholars give it permissible from this angle. If you go to the bank or the dealer or whatever, and they actually do give you a real 0% interest loan, and you purchase the car and you pay it back to them, and they just wanted you to, the way they profit is through the original profit for the asset of the car. Here, the scholar says permissible. But does this exist here in the West? I don't know. We haven't seen where he said right now, as of 22 brands of cars in September 2023, the lowest interest rate is 0.99 of Chevrolet and GMC. Right now, yes, people do buy now, but right now it's still doubtful, as we mentioned. The next scenario is regarding Toyota specifically, and maybe Ford. Because those two are referred as the owner of those who are financing. They're not going through anyone else, they're saying. They're actually owners. You're going to them, Toyota, and Toyota, they have their own finance department where they finance cars. So when you're going to them to purchase a car, whether they say 4%, whether they say 0%, it doesn't matter, because you're purchasing a car and they are the ones that are selling. So that's what some have said, but in reality it does matter. Firstly, from the angle that if it is 4%, you don't know what price you're going to pay. If you end up paying this term, completed this term, you may pay this. If you finish the payments early, you pay less. That's not allowed. Whether they own it or not, like this is, you're not allowed to go into a contract not knowing what you're going to pay. There's ambiguity. So whether it's riba or not, you're not allowed to go into a contract and you don't know what you're going to pay. Because the risk factor therein. From the next angle is, are they really consider to be a third party, or they're just all one? They're actually like a third party. And the person you went to is a dealership, and as dealerships are, they're like franchise. Like a person, McDonald's, Canada. So Toyota owns their own bank, and they provide finance and so forth. So this dealership, which is like a franchise, it went, or like its own company, it went and got from its partnership of a third party to finance the amount. So it's not really to say that Toyota owns it, so there's no problem. So a lot of the people now, the way they get their cars, they go straight to Toyota, and they already know how the Muslims are. They say, don't worry, do a buy down, we'll cut it to 0 interest, we'll make it flat rates, and there's no other third party involved, it's just us. And then it becomes halal zulal, like halal, like fresh water. So a lot of people are on that opinion of those who have finance and cars, but it's doubtful for these reasons. It's actually a third party, brothers. And they on their website, they're clearly telling you, and even on the contract you're going to sell, they call it the cost of borrowing. That is within the contract that they're putting in for you. They still write it down, the cost of borrowing. They call it financing. On their website, they call it lending. They call it a loan. And they're calling it with everything you can name it, of just to show you that this is not a regular sales installment. It's slightly different. And this is it in a nutshell, because for them to generate funds for you, and that requires a lot. And it's not everyone that you're just going to a place and say, I'm going to purchase this in installments, I'll pay you in installments, don't worry. And there's a risk factor. He wants someone to secure. Who's going to take that responsibility and bring the funds for this car? So the finance company says, I'll do it. I'll pay for the car with the condition he pays me back more, and also the car is collateral, just to make sure my money that I generated is... So this shows you everything, that this is real loan, brothers. Stop getting deceived. People keep saying this is just a regular sale of installments. Taib. Another thing that we wanted to conclude with is Ford. Ford, they also own, like they have their own financial service where they finance, but as again, they're also ascribed to having as of like their own bank or their own establishment. So it's like separate. And that they reside in Dearborn, Michigan, like the main headquartered. So everything else is like a branch that takes that loan from them, and they do that. Okay, inshallah, I hope we've... And nowadays, they said, whenever you do the 0% interest, you're even missing out. They don't give rebates to you. Probably the card is like a 5,000 rebate. And because you ask for interest, you miss out. You ask for 0%, you miss out. So I'm not to say you should worry about this, but in terms of like, it's not even in your favor conventionally. And in terms of, it's very expensive. A lot of people have suffered, they paid so much. It's not advised. It's not advised. It has a lot of pricey catches to it. And then also with the contract, from one finance company to another, they have different rules for the trading. like trading in your car, the value. All of this has to be looked at and considered. So people now ask, what should they resort to? There's different alternatives. And inshallah, next class we're going to mention another alternative of purchasing cars. So, when you say something is one thing should people avoid, you need to tell them what's the alternative, inshallah. So we stop with this. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. We'll take a 5 minutes break or a few minutes break, and then we'll go on to the next book. So those who want to stretch their legs, you can stretch their legs. And those who want to continue until after Maghrib, take a break, then they can do so. Barakallahu feekum.